Wonderful, wonderful. It's another day, and I'm happy to be here today to ensure that we are back on live recording. And today's conversation is about what happens when a mission meets scale. Many founders begin with instinct, urgency, and lived experiences. They see a problem, the market has ignored, and they build because something should have existed already. They move because the need is personal, practical, and immediate. But at some point, instinct alone is no longer enough. The company grows, the decisions multiply, the team expands, the market becomes more demanding, and investors want clarity. Customers want trust, and the mission needs a stronger operating system. Today, you're asking a powerful question. What happens when a human who spent 15 years building commercial systems inside some of the tech most demanding markets turns that discipline towards founders building the technologies women and parents needed before the market was ready? And what decision infrastructure, which is a trademark, do those founders need to scale without losing mission? Welcome to Impact Masters, the podcast where we sit with builders, leaders, founders, operators, creators, and visionaries who are shaping the future of technology, business, leadership, and human potential. This is a space for conversations that go beneath the surface. We explore not only what people are building, but why it matters. Not only how companies scale, but what kind of human beings and systems they produce along the way. Body, mind, and spirit. Not only the intelligence of technology, but the wisdom required to use it well. At Impact Masters, we believe that meaningful impact requires more than ambition. It requires clarity, requires discipline, and requires courage. It requires systems that serve people, not the other way around. I'm your host, Michael Kemadi, or if you want, MK. And today's guest is Arriel Balogun, or Mrs. Arriel Balogun. Before I let Arriel on stage, Arriel has spent more than 15 years inside the commercial engine of some of the most demanding industries in technology. Our path has moved through finance, sales operation, revenue operations, telecom hardware, SaaS, cybersecurity, and AdTech, name them. Today, she is the founder of Infinitely Elevated, where she works as go-to-market RevOps Coach and navigates go-to-market consultant and RevOps Coach for founders, navigating growth, complexity, and scale. Her focus is especially important. She supports founders in FemTech, ParentingTech, and B2B SaaS. These are founders building in categories where the need is urgent, the market is evolving, and commercial infrastructure has often lagged behind the human reality. She's also the creator of Decision Infrastructure, which is a trademark, a framework for helping founders move from instinctive growth to more deliberate, structured, and scalable decision-making. Arriel is one of the few operators bringing commercial infrastructure, specifically to women, health, and parenting technology at scale. But today's conversation is not simply about revenue operations. It is about what it means to build systems for markets that were ignored for too long. It's about what founders lose when they scale on instincts alone. It's about what women, parents, families, and underserved communities deserve from the next generation of technology. And it's about how mission-driven companies can grow with discipline without losing their soul. Arriel, welcome to Impact Masters, where the conversations are had. And how are you today? How are you today, Arriel? It seems like we can't get you. Arriel, I don't know if we can speak so that I hear you. Still, we can't hear you. Maybe almost there. 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, the microphone.
Okay, I just switched my mic. Here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How are you today?
I am very good. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me, MK.
Yeah. And it's really fantastic to hear from you today because what you're building is quite novice for different category of human beings. And today we'll discuss by and large what is happening across the spectrum, and with the extensive experience in tech, you've done it all. Let me say that. Ariel, before we talk about decision infrastructure, trademark, FemTech, parenting tech, and commercial at scale, I would love for people who have never met you, and this is the first time meeting you, to understand the person behind the work. Where do you come from? What shaped your view of work, ambition, leadership, women, systems, opportunity? And when you look back at your journey from the finance into revenue operations and now into helping founders build companies for women, parents, and underserved markets, what parts of your personal story help us understand why this work matters so deeply to you? What's that journey like for you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So it starts honestly with my background and where I grew up. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I am a native. I am still here. But having the Bay Area and Silicon Valley as my essentially as my backyard, I got to see tech explode, and I saw it as my sandbox. I saw it as a place where I could thrive as well. And so that was a huge catalyst for me, really being um, structured in the way that I wanted to grow, but also in a way that made sense for myself and my trajectory. A lot of times, I think throughout my early early career and young adulthood, it was like you could do anything, and I'm like, well, how do you shape anything when the world is your oyster and you see how technology is booming and exploding? And so thinking about my education, that was a big part of it. How I wanted to understand business and the world around me. And so I have an undergraduate degree in communication studies and sociology. I then went on to get my master's in business administration, where I learned about international business, finance, and entrepreneurship, so that I can learn from some of the leaders that came before me that are still here and emerging, to see how I can chart my own path. And then as my journey evolved past graduate school into my career in startup environments in technology specifically, then I started to think about how can I think about finance in a different way? How can I shape how we work together that makes more sense than just complaining and kind of throwing the whole playbook out the window and starting from scratch all over again. I really took it upon myself to learn about how other people tick. Where can we find patterns and commonalities? Where can we, lean on each other for success? And then personally, my journey with becoming a wife and a mother has definitely shaped my viewpoints around female technology, around parenting, in where we are today, especially like I said, in Silicon Valley Bay Area, how that shapes everything that I do every single day, and honestly how I bring that to the clients that I serve. So I'll talk a lot about my operations experience, but that's just the intro about me and why these fields are very important to me today.
Thank you for sharing that. Your path has many chapters: finance, sales operations, revenue operations. And this is in Silicon Valley at the center of it. SaaS, when you talk about SaaS, this is the invention of Silicon Valley. Cybersecurity, hardware, AdTech, and now FemTech and ParentingTech. From the outside, that may look nonlinear, right? But from the inside, I imagine there was a thread connecting it all. What was that thread for you? And what were you learning about business, people, decisions, and system at each stage of the journey?
Yeah, so good question. So I actually started my career in finance, which in specifically in accounts receivable and billing, which means I was usually the last person to know when these contracts would come my way, and they were having these very interesting and unique clauses, or the way that the sales folks were trying to structure these contracts. And I'm like, these are contractually binding, these are legal documents, so we can't really think of them lightly. And so part of the path to getting to revenue operations was being very curious around, why are we doing this? What is the goal here? What is the outcome? What are you trying to achieve? And how can I work with you to get there? So the curiosity was the big question. And then also being kind of relentless about supporting the teams that needed the help the most. So raising my hands and saying, you know what, I see you, new sales leader. Your team is struggling in these ways. I'm not here to tattletale. I'm really here to be a catalyst to your support and your growth, and ultimately helping you, achieve your sales goals quarter over quarter. That's all I'm here to do. That kind of branding, stemmed with me and followed me through my career, and saying, like, she's the lady that makes the complex things really simple. And that turned into people literally sitting at my desk when I was in corporate, and they would wait for me as I was coming out of meetings to say, hey, I need help on this contract. Can you help me figure this out? Or I'm a little stuck here. Or we have a new product that's coming out, and I heard I need to talk to you. Or I see your face and your name everywhere on all of these documents. I just came to, show up to help. So that being like my name and my reputation starting to speak for itself, to say, you know what, this is the person that is going to provide that level of clarity that I need, and literally handhold me through that way, so that I don't have the same challenges and issues that I've had before. How can we learn and do better? So that became a huge part of my brand while I was in corporate. I still have that brand today. And then moving to revenue operations, it was a series of aha moments, really, of folks saying, hey, you realize you're no longer doing finance anymore. This is sales operations. And then as I thought about sales operations, thinking about customer success, that team and those organizations and departments are usually kind of put off to the last to know, kind of in my early finance days. And I said, well, how can I bring that together? Because if I'm building processes, systems, I'm, optimizing tools and things like that, and coming up with strategies, we need to think about the entire revenue engine. And we cannot leave, the customer success or customer experience side of the house out of that loop. And so that's where I start to really bridge anything we're doing in sales. It likely will touch our post-sales or customer success teams. And so I need to think of processes and systems in a way that really includes those folks, instead of being kind of an afterthought, really, in how we're building towards our company growth. And that's how I think about my clients, and supporting them today as well. What are you thinking to retain the customers that you've already spent marketing investments on? Your sales team has already closed. How can we continue to keep them engaged as your customer? Because right now, in the world of tech and AI, things are moving very quickly. There are a lot of competitors out there. So, you've already spent the time and the effort to secure that customer or that client base. Let's keep them. So I'll talk a little bit more about my journey as a mother, as a wife, et cetera, and how that has also shaped the entry points into the new fields that I'm loving. I'm loving this. So I want to keep saying and keep the viewers watching.
No worries, you'll get there. So I want to dive deeper around finance. Because finance teaches people to pay attention to numbers. And as they say, the proverbial numbers never lie, right? Risk, timing, discipline, and consequences of those numbers not adding up. Those are most important founders' lessons. How did your finance background shape the way you think about growth today? And what did finance teach you that many founders only discover much later?
Ooh, that is a really good question. So the finance background gave me the language that I needed to have better conversations with the executives in the room, to speak their language, to understand, like, well, what is your CFO saying, and how do I start to translate the work that we're doing in the way that CFOs understand, and ultimately the board of directors, if you have one, if how they understand language and lingo as well, because we have to always translate the activities that we're doing into a language that matters to the folks that are stakeholders and are watching us and also instrumental in our success. So that's the catalyst for being able to start my career there, and not a lot of consultants can do, quite frankly, and say like, how do I translate the activity into a way that it makes sense for our finance teams and our finance folks, and developing that narrative that's needed to tell the story of where we are, where we're going, and why it matters. Oh, Michael, I lost your audio.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. So you also moved to sales operations and revenue systems, which looks like you did something right with the finance, and these actually gave you, the pathway to start this journey. And what started to become clear to you about companies' really growth? And here I do not mean the theory of growth as you know it. I mean the real daily work of how teams make decisions, serve customer, miss opportunities, build trust, create momentum. What did you begin to understand that changed how you saw business?
So in startups, we move fast. We move very fast, and sometimes we rely on instinct. We may have signals that may push us to move one way or another in a business, and that's good. You have to have instincts as a business owner, as leaders of these organizations. But also, what I realize is that you definitely need to have better processes that go alongside that. Otherwise, you are going to spin our wheels, making mistakes. I'm not saying making mistakes are a bad thing, but we have to learn from them. And when we are learning from them, we also want to think about, well, what are the patterns can we see from the activities that we're doing, the processes that we're following to give us more success? So then that instinct that we're leading with starts to become operationalized, which means, how do we create a sequence, or how do we create a workflow, or how do we think about how we hand things from one team or department to the next one? That's the type of stuff that gets lost in translation. And when you are looking at things, we call them silos. When you look at things in silos, that's when you kind of lose some of that customer context, that customer story. And when they get to a place where they are moving from sales to maybe an implementation team to then our post-sales or customer success teams, we need to have that context for better instincts that we are making with that customer or with that customer segment, rather than just kind of guessing, because guessing is where we kind of things fall through the cracks and we start to lose those customers. And you're like, well, what happened? And everybody goes into a tizzy trying to kind of gather that information and figure out, how to chart the course or right the wrongs, if you will. I do want to talk about, as I'm thinking about it, I do want to talk about one of my breakout projects that was kind of integral in the earlier part of my career. It's called Salesforce CPQ, or Configure Price Quote. There's other platforms that offer that as well. But that was really the catalyst where I was like, this is where we can make some inroads on what we're doing in terms of sales and standardizing what we're doing. So when I see contracts back in the day and even today, and I'm like, why do we have discount thresholds that are so steep? Why do we have, we're missing specific SKUs that should be on the contract, because we need those SKUs. We need to either have them pay for it, or if it's a complimentary thing, we need to have that reflected, or contract language that is a mismatch to what was sold. So when I see these things, I see it as a risk to the business. I see it as a risk to the salesperson that sold it, because I've been part of conversations where we've had some really tough conversations about clawbacks for sales. And for folks out there, that is not a great conversation to have, to say, hey, we met our quota, and then all of a sudden we have to bring that back and say, no, we have to go redo the paperwork because it wasn't right. That creates like a strain on your internal teams. You lose momentum, honestly, as a business when these things happen. So that was one way that I said, how can I drive consistency? How can I drive the consistency so much that it brings clarity? And I said, now I can tell you, sales rep, this is what you're doing. This is not quite what we're looking for. This is how I can help train or enable you to, to our standards as the business. And then we can also optimize on that to say, hey, you do this really well, salesperson. I like this. Keep going. This is what we want to see more of. And then we start to think about your performance and changing behavior, and then how comp plans or compensation plans or quotas are starting to tie into that conversation rather than just instinct. And then how do you talk about performance when you're just talking specifically on instinct? It's very hard to measure that.
Yeah. I mean, and the beauty of it, thank you for sharing that use case. The beauty of it is that you've worked across several demanding industries as it is, from SaaS, telecom, hardware, among many other, industries. And you've seen some of the things actually come up. But of course, you have different buyers, different sales cycles, different level of complexity. But of course, I suspect there's some patterns that keep repeating and which form that consistency to make sure that you keep afloat and also you deliver on your side. But what did you keep seeing inside companies that were trying to grow? And where did things usually become unclear, inefficient, or unnecessarily painful, especially in startups?
Yeah, the most painful things, I could go on a long tangent here, but for the folks out there that just say, everything's in my head, I've got it. Like, that is the number one thing that we don't got. We gotta do better there. Like, find a better way to document how you do things. What's your process? Why did we consider this component as part of our process? And why have we excluded those things? I call it like a risk register, or just a register of any sort. Like, you just keep the lessons learned that you have in terms of your organization, so that you remember that when you are thinking about introducing a new product or service for your business. So you can say, oh, we had that big aha moment on the last time we did this. Let's make sure to not have that same mistake when we are thinking about our beta customers, or how we move them from beta to actually paid customers. So keeping it in your head, that's one big, no, just try to get that documented. Another one is assuming that people understand what you mean. We have a lot of smart folks out there that have context and definitions around literally the same terminology, but when we are working in new environments, or we're adding new folks to our teams, we need to be able to speak the same language and not assume that we all know what we're talking about. We have a lot of folks that are head nodders. Yes, I get it. I understand. I'm ready to move on. And then we start to see things kind of break, or things are falling through the cracks. And you're like, what is happening? Well, I, understand an opportunity to mean this, or I understand a lead to mean that. And you're like, what? Or the handoff was supposed to happen in the system and it didn't. Like, did you do the human touch and say, hey, such and such on this team, you're assigned to this account. Do my notes make sense? Should I clarify anything before I hand this over to you? And really having those touch points rather than assuming that the text got us. AI is taking us a very, very long way to be able to kind of close those loops. But if you're relying on AI, read it. Please read it. Don't just ignore it and assume that it's correct. We know AI can be it can be posture as it is correct, but sometimes it's very loud and very wrong. And the context is missing in some cases. So that's what I help founders to really understand nowadays, when we are thinking about how to structure an engagement together and what it means to be successful. Like, you also have to define that for your company and for your teams. Like, what does success look like? Because if we're all marching, in different paths, we'll eventually get to the same place, but it'll take us a lot longer, rather than making sure that we do that upfront work to, describe and explain and have folks understand where you're coming from, so that we can really make the progress we want to see in this organization as a whole.
Yeah. And with ownership, of course, comes, with also owning what has gone wrong. And one of those things, especially in hardware, cybersecurity, even sometime in SaaS, there are those problems that show up and they are misdiagnosed. Did the leaders actually recognize those issues early, or did they sometimes diagnose the problem? For example, did they call it a sales problem when it's really a decision problem? Blame shifting. Did they call it a product problem when it was really an infrastructure problem? Did they call it a people problem when it's the system problem that was not clear? What did you observe in your experience?
Oh, the blame game is real. It happens all the time. We want to point fingers. We want to make sure that, we're absolved from any wrongdoing or lack of success, because again, that is what is perpetuated in startup culture. You want to always be successful. The number should be up and to the right. And so when anything kind of is counter to that, then we start to say, well, I didn't have anything, or I said this one thing in the meeting that should have changed everything around. So having that blame game is there, but part of this process of kind of understanding how to remove the blame game when things go wrong is understanding the signals before you get there. So that is a huge catalyst, because if we have founders or executives that are so ingrained into their day-to-day, into the business, they can't kind of back up and see like, where do we have some gaps here? And then secondarily, if someone finds those gaps, do we have a business environment or company culture that respects that people are calling flag on the play? Because if I am, working for a founder and I'm constantly saying, hey, this is wrong, I'm seeing patterns, can you as a founder receive that? Or can you as an executive leader receive that and say, you know what, thank you for calling that out. Let's figure out how we can come up with a strategy around that. Or if you feel emboldened as an operator to say, I've thought of 3 strategies and I'd like to make sure that we walk away with the best one with, the right folks in the room, can we have that conversation and take it to the next? The blame game happens, but the work I do is to try to prevent all of these things that I've seen in tech for very long, because you just need to spend a little extra time to think about it up front so that it doesn't become a huge issue once, you missed your goals or missed your quota, or, the product failed or flopped. And so like I work, as early as like product development and refining what the product market fit is, all the way through founders that, have a product, it is in the market, but really trying to understand where things are breaking and why revenue is possibly leaking from a financial standpoint.
Interesting. And this brings us to one of the most important ideas in your work, which is decision infrastructure. And I can see you have actually trademarked, the framework. For a founder listening who doesn't come from RevOps or operations background, how would you explain decision infrastructure trademark in simple language? What is it? Why does it matter? How did you get there? And what it is not, so that they get that clarity?
Yeah. So the decision infrastructure it's built for revenue teams. So it's not just the founder or founder-led sales. It's a founder that is growing their entire go-to-market motion, and they need some operational rigor when it comes to their sales to post-sales processes. So that's where I focus primarily. How I came to build the infrastructure is, honestly, I said, how could I create a clone of my years of experience, like the gotchas, the blaming, the blame game, all of those really painful things that we feel on the job, to then be able to give that kind of an infrastructure to very underserved markets. So I talk a lot about female technology. I talk about parenting technology specifically because we have longer sales cycles. The product market fit is still TBD or to be determined in some cases. And when understanding who our buyers are and who our customers are, it takes a long time. And that doesn't mean that you have 13 plus years like I did to build that revenue operations rigor just to understand how to do it. So what the decision infrastructure does is allow you to kind of have my back end knowledge of the things, like it's probably around 40 different categories of revenue operations questions. And then within those categories, It has a series of high, medium, and low priority questions that can be asked of you through the use of AI at some point when it's applicable to your business. So you as a founder or executive team can think through, oh, what would I do in this scenario? What is a fallback plan if this were to happen? The AI is starting to pick up that it's triggering certain discussions that probably we should have as a team sooner rather than later, rather than guess. So we can still rely on the instinct, but using that operational rigor in terms of your revenue to think proactively around how to support yourself as a founder, your executive team, or extension of your teams to make the right size decisions. A big part of that is when teams are starting to grow, the founder still holds everything. And I get it. I understand you want to hold everything, and because you feel that if you take care of it, it's going to be done to your expectations. But this is also part of enabling your team and the extension of your team to be able to act on your behalf, because you have set the infrastructure up proactively to allow folks to do that. So that's a lot of.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
But even let's break it further, because in practice sometimes it might give people really the idea, right? And in this case, imagine a founder comes to you and says, Ariel, I have customers, I have momentum, I have a team, but everything feels harder than it should. Where would you begin? Where would you look at first? Would you look at the data, the sales process, the decision rights, the founder's role, the customer's journey, the operating rhythm, the investment? How do you diagnose what is really happening to be able to help that founder use decision infrastructure for their benefit?
Yeah. To be honest, I start with listening. You can always think about data or data diagnostics and things like that, but I need to hear from folks, what are the expectations, what has been outlined as the standard, and how are we deviating from that? Then I can use those narratives from different layers of the business, from C-suite all the way down to like the analyst or intern level if you have one, to understand where things are breaking or failing, to find those patterns. And then I go to the data and say, well, where is that? We talked about this at separate levels of the organization in terms of how we think about this process, or think about this handoff, or think about, if I just think about sales process specifically, where are you putting this information? Does the data back up what we're saying we do? And looking for those kind of misalignments. And then that's where we can start to chart a path forward to say, well, it looks like you don't have a sales to post sales process at all. It is just focused heavily on sales, and then customer success. Good luck, get in where you fit in. Like, that's not quite the process we need to be thinking of. It's like, all right, now that we have the list, I call it a listening tour. So if we've done the listening tour, we've looked at we've uncovered the patterns or misalignments. Now we can start to think of quick wins in terms of what can we do to have the technology serve where some of those gaps are. How then we can think about training and enablement to support teams to really pick up the process that we say we do and actually execute it realistically and in real life. Not just like the pie in the sky approach. And so that's where we're thinking about different areas of the business and saying, are we doing what we're saying we're doing or not? Because if we're not doing it, that's a gap. That could lead to revenue leakage. Or as you are nurturing certain, your prospective customers, and you're not following up with them in 30 days, like, that's way too long. you know, like, especially, some sales cycles take a while, but have you
Yeah.
thought about who's the champion? Who's going to really be excited in the company to like buy your product and like tell the world about it? Who's actually paying for it? And do they understand why it's valuable? And then also having them understand, if your product comes into this organization, they buy it. Yay. How do you
Mm.
make it sticky? When we say sticky in terms of, SaaS or a startup land, that means, how do we make sure that you retain that logo or that customer over time? Because again, we all have options. We all can say, you know what, this sucks, or they're not listening to me. I don't feel heard. I don't feel seen. So I'm going to go over here where I feel seen and I feel heard, and I'm going to spend my money there. That happens all the time in tech, all the time in startups. And so when we think about, that's revenue loss. So then I get to the post-sale side of the house and say, what are you doing to retain the customer? And some people may say, I do this, I do that. It's not a test like, an assessment. It's really have you found your way to adhere to the policies or the workflows or the procedures that we have and make it yours? Because the same way I would want to retain a customer is different than the way maybe MK would want to retain a customer and have folks back on and things like that. So that's what we really have to think about when I say sales to post-sales process. Yes, you have a process, you have a rhythm, but how do you make it yours and to the benefit of that customer? Okay, it's not just like we are the best in the industry or we got this award and we were we have notoriety in other places. It's really like, are you really serving them, and have you earned that dollar to come back into your pocketbook as a company versus another one? So that's what we really need to think of. And I think the focus is really moving back towards that customer lens piece, because it's not just getting sales. I hear a lot. I just literally came from a conference and they're talking a lot about just lead generation. Like how can we get so many leads to you? We can get 100 leads, a week for you. Like, well, can your business handle that volume? Are they qualified to be your leads? Are they just anybody? How are you taking people through that understanding as well? It's like, it doesn't just stop at the lead. You have to go deeper than that.
Yeah, the experience has to make sense in every level, especially right now when people have so many options. And it's all about like, how do you make me feel? Yes, I'm paying, I'm getting the solution, but do I feel like everything I'm doing is so robotic, is so AI, so like no human behind it? Sometimes even you chat to some of these tools that have been released in the market, and it feels like that authentic self is not really coming out. But this is a question many founders quietly carry, and it revolves around, how does a founder know whether they have a product problem or a commercial infrastructure problem? Because sometimes the product is not the real issue, right? Sometimes the market is not the real issue. And I like it that you listen first and then you are able to tell where the problem is and advise accordingly. Sometimes the company simply does not yet have the structure to convert interest into repeatable growth. How do you help founders tell the difference, especially when they want to grow at scale?
Mm-hmm. So I work with primarily early stage founders. So sometimes these are first time founders, sometimes highly technical founders. And so that's perfectly fine. But understanding the operations behind it is kind of a gap. And so when we say, like, is this a product problem? It's like, okay, when's the last time you've gone in and had someone test it, where it is today, objectively, and to see if there's a product flaw or is there something that's just not resonating, with on the product side. So think about that. Like, can you go back in and just create it as a repeatable process that you do to test your own product? Whether it's you as a founder, or you have a team, or you have, other folks out there that you want to kind of just get engaged again. Like, hey, can you test this feature or help me understand this? Listen on the product side. When we think of founders who struggle in other areas, like, is it a product market fit? I think there's a fit for everything. Okay. Like, if there's at least one person that wants to buy it, you'll be able to sell it again. But understanding if you're moving into a market that makes sense at the right time, does it make sense? These are the types of things where you look at, how we operate just as people. Like, we want to, like, oh, we got to, hang on to things, or we got to let it go. Like, this is no longer working for us. That's okay. What can we do to enhance it? What can we do to replace it? And when I say it can be process, it could be the workflow, it could be the automation, it could be like, sometimes you got to literally throw the whole thing in the trash and come back and start from scratch, and that's okay. I think in our world today, where we move so quickly, taking that step back to say, let's learn from what's working and what's not, and be okay with failure sometimes, be okay with starting again to make it better. That's where I think we can spend a little bit more time instead of always moving fast. And AI is great, but you also have to document with what is this AI going to do for us? What is the outcome that we're expecting? How can we test it before we completely roll this thing out?
Yeah.
It's I mean, this is my own personal philosophy, but like vibe coding something over the weekend and like rolling it out is not the best bet. Like get feedback from real people, the humans that will actually use your product or service. If you
Mhm.
want to extend it out to a small cohort, if you will, like do what you need to do to actually hear back from people, because AI, like I said, can be loud and wrong. We're trying to use AI for, testing, because I work with health tech founders, and that sometimes that there's a small bridge between biotech founders and using AI to do machine learning and pick up signals and things like that. But like AI can still miss things, so you have
Mm.
to use the human context around what are we doing to actually benefit the person that will inevitably use your product, not just AI, but how can we really think about how they are leveraging this product or service to their benefit so that they keep using it. If it's something that is going to be too clunky for me to understand, too clunky for me to get onboarded or understand how to get the full value out of it, rethink that approach.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of, I'm an operator at heart, so I still test a lot of products. I raise my hand. I love this stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so as much as I can be a guinea pig on understanding um, what the customer experience will be, helps me figure out how to optimize further for your product or service, and how we strategize internally across your sales to post sales processes, your systems, your tools, your processes, your people as well.
Wonderful. I think you have said something really powerful about what is happening with SaaS products right now. And one of the key lessons that most SaaS products start to realize that the solution that they have been providing for the last decade about collaboration, productivity is not enough anymore, because that could happen anyway, and it's just overtaken by time. But what people are looking at today is, the connection of the knowledge, because you find that if the knowledge is well connected, and then, tools like AI, machine learning come into play, then there's institutional knowledge that is equally distributed. And this means that, anyone who onboards that don't take so much time to really understand what is happening here. In fact, they could understand that within, days, and still contribute their novice knowledge that
Mhm.
really takes the company to the next level. Uh, you know, Another thing that we have seen in the trend is tokenization of, productivity, which also, most of these companies are rethinking. Like, does it mean if you burn more tokens you're more productive? It's not necessarily, right. But if you're able to solve the problem at hand, and, get to the next level and take move the needle, then it means everything for the company. And these actually, it actually indicates that there are lessons to be learned in the process. What are the signs a founder should not ignore? Because in every day, a founder, or someone who is in the leadership, if the customer like the product but deals are slow, what might that mean? If the team has data but different people interpret numbers differently, what might that mean? If revenue is growing but the forecasting still feels emotional, what might that mean? If the founder is working harder but feeling less clear, what might that mean? Because every signal here matters. As you said, moving swiftly but with clear purpose in your previous pointer is really important. But also there's those nuances that might be missed. But what does that mean for the founder?
Yeah, the one that popped out explicitly to me was around the forecast question. Um,
Mm,
that one is kind of the most painful thing that I've seen, and it happens regularly, where we think we can pull a report. Yay, we have all the data. The data will tell us where we're going, how we're doing, how we're trending. Um, but then it's missing signals. You're starting to create the presentation slides for the board, and you're like, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't match what our enterprise level rep said, or this is kind of missing some data. Like it's not
Mm,
including some of the opportunities that we have. And then you go scramble to fill in these gaps,
mm,
fill in all of this because from an instinct perspective, the data is not where it needs to be presented outwardly and tell a full story around how our revenue is growing. So then we go into like maybe these 2 days of like information gathering, pinging the reps. Hey, can you update your opportunities? Hey, can you make sure everything is up to date? So that I can have the most accurate information to tell the story around forecasting. And then you layer on all these other like fancy tools on top of that to tell you more stuff around data that's still incorrect because we need better raw data that's being input and not in people's heads. And so
mm,
finally get to a place where like, great, deep breath. I can finally, present something that I can stand behind in terms of forecasting and where our numbers are going. And for our viewers out there that don't really understand what forecasting means, it's just where do we anticipate how much we will close as a business, either on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis? Are we actually trending to meet our goals as a company on a monthly basis, quarterly basis? It compounds because we all have, annual goals that we're trying to meet. Everybody plays a part in that. Especially RevOps, because we see the full picture on how we'll be able to get there or if we're not. Um, so we think about this forecast like episode that we do every, sequentially, monthly or quarterly, and we go through this and we all are all stressed out. We finally get the information, but then what happens after that? People go back to the same rhythm. People go back to the same um, like ways of operating when I say rhythm, and it doesn't move the needle. So then you do it
mm,
again next month. I got to scramble, ask you to update your opportunities. I have to check with finances to make sure that they have, the right information as well. And so it's a lot of cross checking, and it's almost like a little dance that we need to do to make sure that we're telling the right stories around our data and how we'll close. The second part of that is also looking at the individual level as well. So I'm giving y'all some tea, some gems here, but looking at the individual person level as well. So if we know that forecasting is a combination of sales and how much sales is able to close at an individual rep level, do we know that Johnny can close at 40% for his market? Do we know that this enterprise rep will close at 20%? That's roughly the average right now. But will they close deals at a roughly 20% close rate, month over the month or quarter over quarter? What happens when Johnny takes a break or
mm.
Linda says, I'm out of here? What happens? So we have to think about those as,
Or they get an offer,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and
especially
then
in Silicon Valley. That's common.
they get an offer, they're like, I'm moving on, and that's the rest is history there. But how do we start to think about how to close those gaps in terms of meeting our revenue goals? And then we need to think about post sales as well, or our customer success or customer experience. Are we closing our renewals on time? And this is for subscription based businesses. We're closing the renewals on time? Was it expected? If you have something that's more of like instead of B2B, you have B2C. We think about apps that we download all the time. Ooh, super excited. I love this app. And then something goes wrong, you delete app. There goes your revenue. Poof, no explanation. And so really thinking about, are you looking at the trends when it comes to at the individual level? Are there signals that are not being picked up in one system versus another? One of the founders I was talking to recently, she could not figure out for the life of her, like, what is happening? She couldn't, make a pattern through the signals that were in different systems. So like in one system, like she's seeing like everything looks great. We're looking good. But then in other systems that she had, she was missing the signals like someone removed their credit card information. Oh, that's a signal that they might churn, that they
Mm,
might not renew with you, or if it's a month to month type of subscription model, if they remove their payment method, guess what? By the time that renewal date comes around or that subscription date comes around, there's nothing to trigger a payment and actually get payment. So let's
Yeah.
look at that as an early signal and say, hey, Sheila, like we see that you removed your credit card as a form of payment. She could have lost her credit card, who knows, and forgot to put one back. Just having that outreach or something as in terms of your process to say, hey, we noticed this. Is there something we can do? How can we delight you more in terms of our product or service? Are you willing to, we're going to, have another round of testing with our new features that come out. Would you like to be a part of that? Bring them back into the fold. A lot of times when I speak, whether it's podcast or if you've heard me in person, things like that, I talk a lot about customer retention as like dating and like how
Mm.
you engage. Like, did you bring your client flowers? And so that's what I think about. How to delight them. Have you brought them flowers lately? Did you remember
Mm.
their birthday? Did you remember if they've spent, a lot of money with you? Did you thank them? Have they bought you a lot of referrals? Like bringing other customers in. How are you rewarding them for that behavior so that you keep it going, in perpetuity? Like you want more folks like that. How do you continue to engage those customers and not leave them hanging and say, oh, it's time to pay again. Hope you're ready to pay. Like, give me the pocketbook. Like, that's not how real relationships work. So, thinking about our people and our product and our technology at that level of literally service of customers is the way we should be thinking about it, not like a land grab and just get everybody in and then, good luck is how it's kind of how it feels on a customer perspective or point of view.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think the modern day business, regardless of, the sector, it's all about the only email I get from you is always asking something from me. Then definitely it doesn't matter how good your service is. If I don't really need that service, it's not dire to my business, I'll not like stick with you forever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So, but if your experience is good, there's a community, there's a connection, definitely the business grows in a great way. And you have seen even, key figures in the tech world acquire, even pay for the community. Case in point, Twitter to X,
mm-hmm,
right? Resorting to, IPO, greatest IPO, resorting to great wealth created across, and all these stories actually are all over, and people could actually see it versus, the brick and mortar kind of business where, the founders are like, as long as you're making our revenue and the credit card is not removed, we can just do bare minimum. You have even seen the trend of where, some of the flights have gone ahead and installed the internet, as a complimentary. And, it gives you that experience that it doesn't mean you can stop working while you're, traveling or keeping in touch with your family. And we'll talk more about that, because if you're a parent and maybe you are doing this business travel, keeping in touch with your family back at home is one of the greatest thing. Even updating them like where you are and stuff like that, just to keep in touch and knowing how everything is going on. Also getting updates of the emergencies back at home,
mm-hmm.
that would really help a lot. But you mentioned something else that was really kind of interesting in terms of founder instinct, right? So I want to focus on founder instinct. And one of the key things, many founders start with instinct, the gut feeling, well known out there. They see something others do and not see. They move before the market fully understands the opportunity. They build from urgency, conviction, and lived experiences. That thing is powerful, but at some point it can also become heavy, especially when you're scaling. What does it cost a founder to keep scaling on instinct alone? And when does that, cost usually become visible? Does it show up fast in revenue, team confusion, founder burnout, poor forecasting, investor conversations, or something more subtle that actually, compounds something that actually impacts the business and also the well-being of the company?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think about that on a multitude of angles and perspectives because I've seen it so many times where the instinct, while you're small and you're nimble and agile, that works because people can keep up. They get the context. You're in a meeting. It makes sense. Everybody goes out and does their things. As a team grows, that context is lost. Things are like short, like the founders sometimes feel like if I just say the thing that I want, it will magically happen without giving the context, without having the documentation, without understanding what those outcomes are. And then people just go off and do their own thing and it doesn't really come back full circle. Or people build things that is not to delight the founder and they're like, what the heck is this? So then we have mismanaged expectations, we have confusion, that leads to burnout. It's like, oh my God, my founder came up with another idea and now we have to do this. And I was not even able to like figure out the last process that they told me to do. Like I'm struggling here. And then we think that people, yes, people are smart, but people are also very busy and there's a lot happening, a lot of information all the time. So then when you as a founder or executive team layer in something else that's like, hey, this is a new and fancy, shiny idea. I learned about this and now I want the whole company to operate this way. Well, they didn't sit in a 2-day training to learn that with you. You have to take them through the process to understand, what do you want from this? What is the expectation? What does success look like to do this well? Or what is it really look like? What does it look? Let's go worst case scenario. Let's just start there. If we don't do this in a certain way, this is the worst case scenario. This is what we're trying to avoid. Okay, fair. Now everybody understands. But then building from that, like, okay, how can we compound this? How will I check in and hold you accountable to that success? How do I make sure that you're actually getting it? Have I presented all of the information that I needed to in the way that you understand it to actually move this forward on my behalf? Those are the types of things that we skip. We skip the steps and still expect, the golden rocket ship up and to the right, a tremendous amount of revenue. And it just doesn't happen that way. And then you layer on AI that's telling you all these things and signals and information like, how do I prioritize this? How do I figure out, if I'm doing this right? I also have to think about my own performance and like, if I don't do this, is my performance review going to be bad? Everybody wants a bonus. I get it. You want your bonus. You want to perform well. So like, how do you make sure that that's in alignment to what you were hired to do? And then sometimes I hear people, and this comes from like the career coaching side of my business. So I've been doing that for years now, and I'm still seeing the same thing. My boss told me I have this idea, he has this idea, or she has this idea, and I have no idea how to execute. They didn't give me very much context at all. They told me to go figure it out. I did, and now they're unhappy because they're like, this is not what I expected. So there's a lot of misinformation. It builds mistrust. A lot of wasted time. That's revenue leakage too. If you don't think about it this way, please do. If you're sending your teams off to go do something by themselves and you haven't really given them the framework in which to operate, good or bad, now they're wasting time on your dime trying to figure it out. And they may or may not get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's very important and really good insight when it comes to instinct. And brings us to, to talk about systems, which is the next stage of leadership, because good system deliver excellent results, and you can improve on system. How do you help a founder understand that building system does not mean they have lost their edge or they have lost their baby, which they started from scratch? How do you help them see that moving from instinct to infrastructure may actually be the next stage of leadership?
Yeah, so it depends on the founder. So different founders kind of understand that conversation at different levels. If you want to go into it in an angle where you're thinking about revenue, well, if you want to operate at this next stage of revenue, the things that we were doing yesterday won't really support what we're doing tomorrow. So we really have to think about the evolution of your business to get to that revenue. Some founders are very brute force and they're like, I just want it yesterday. I've worked with a lot of those. Like, well, if we wanted it yesterday, how can we build it so we get it tomorrow? What can I take off of the plate to make sure that you can get this tomorrow? I mean, tomorrow's, very quick, but like, how do we need to think about this differently? Because we do need to shave off some things to make room for this, because this is now new. This is you and the team operating at a different level and functioning at a different level. And we've got to take everybody on that journey with us. When I say everyone, it is the people, it is our process. We have to go back and check those and make sure it's still serving us. And if it's not, what do we do about that? And then the technology as well. Like, why do we still have fields in here that no one's using? Okay, can I get some fields back? Can I repurpose them to do different things? How do we start to leverage, if we are using other tools and AI to fill in those gaps, do we still really need those fields? Can we do a report on this and see if it still is serving us? Like, what is it that we're missing? Because we can't just keep adding on and think everybody's going to just be okay with that. Our systems will break, our people will fatigue and burn out, and our process will fail us over time, because now we can't point to say this is the process we follow. You can't have like a 17,000 point system in terms of your process and think everybody's going to hit it at 100%. That's just unrealistic. So that's the angle that I take. So sometimes it is a very tough love conversation. Sometimes it's a very like, we're just growing and this is part of our growth stage. So the analogies that I use to support that conversation with founders depends on where the founders are. Usually when they're bringing me in, they're at a place where they want to improve and do things better, not just kind of like put out the fire. Like, hey, Ariel, just do it yesterday, firefight. Like, that's not where I come in. It's like, hey, we want to be proactive about our growth and how we take our teams on this journey to do this with us and make sure that we don't lose them along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as a wife, as a mom, someone who actually has done it all in the industry, you're so passionate about FemTech, parenting tech, and you have so amazing ideas. But I don't want to preempt for those who have not had one-on-one conversation with you. But let's talk a bit about parenting tech. I want to bring this into, FemTech and parenting tech together. And these are deeply human categories. They touch women's health, fertility, motherhood, caregiving, families, bodies, identity, dignity, and access. They are also serious commercial categories. They require trust, they require education, or even re-education. They require market creation, they require capital, they require distribution, they require technical rigor, they require operation discipline, and many, many other things that go with a serious solution like that. Because I think at one point Obama said, if only half of the team that is playing, then definitely you don't get the 100% that you require. And this is not just generic blanket statement. It requires intentional approach to make sure that, you're able to deliver in an environment that really recognizes the challenges that comes with that. So in that case, what personally drew you towards founders building in FemTech and parenting tech? And why do you believe this market deserves stronger commercial infrastructure than they have historically?
Yeah. So this part of the conversation is going to get pretty personal, but don't mind sharing at all. So my journey to motherhood was not easy at all. It took us years before we were able to have our first child. We suffered pregnancy loss. We went through IVF, and those things in and of itself are very, very challenging to deal with. And I learned a lot about myself and advocating for myself in these processes where I'm navigating in the health field. I'm like, this is before AI is like popping like it is today. And I'm like, I actually have to research and figure out, how do I advocate for myself so that myself and my child have the best health outcomes possible. So going through those experiences, and then ultimately with the birth of my first child, I nearly died on the operating table. Like, I lost so much blood that it was very close. And so luckily I'm still here. But in those moments, you're like, dang, I have to think about life differently. and how I want to maneuver for the rest of my life. Like if this were to be it, would I be proud of the life that I live today? And not to say like I wouldn't be, but there's so much more I can do, so much more that's out there. And I've said if I'm pretty well educated and have to like struggle to figure out how to advocate for myself, I wonder what more women are facing that don't have access or don't have the language or don't have the support that they need to get through things like that. So that's why I said FemTech has to be a place where I make inroads before my time on earth is done, and so that I can think about the next generation of women and how they experience their bodies on a day-to-day basis. And we're talking everything, and this is like everything from puberty to perimenopause at this point. We deserve to have our body, like understand our bodies and have the best health possible, and where things are have been in terms of understanding women's health and our bodies and how things work in terms of hormones just hasn't been there. There's huge investments that are happening. The field is growing in female technology specifically, but I want to be a catalyst to these founders that are charting the path in that field. So again, when we think about puberty to perimenopause, that's a whole lifespan of technology, of data, of information that needs to be super connected so that we understand our bodies better. And we can live better lives because we understand how our bodies work in different phases of our lifetime. So that's super critical and important to me. On the parenting side or parenting tech side, I think about, I have small children. They are learning, growing every single day, but as they enter into extracurricular activities, school systems, you get inundated with so many messages all day long about your kids, and it's coming from this platform and that platform, and you really can't think about how to like bring it all together in one place. Like if you have WhatsApp for this soccer club, or football club, or this kid has swimming, that's a lot of information for parents to carry on top of the household, managing our own relationships, our relationships with ourselves, businesses, our careers, other family obligations, etc. So it's a lot to handle. And so again, the same premise is there when I think about parenting technology. How can we start to bring or centralize a lot of that information that we have about our children into one place so that we are not inundated on multiple platforms around our children, so that we can stay on top of their education, learning, and development and holistic well-being? That's what I think about, and how to really think about patterns across their life so that you are at service of your children and how they develop. And so that is another way to support founders that are trying to bring that technology to parents that are just like up to here with messagings and this, and I have to show up to the school for that, or I have parent teacher conferences I have got to show. There's a lot of we carry a lot of mental load when it comes to children. And so that's one of the areas that I'm looking to help those types of tech founders with their product and services. So are you actually taking things off of parents' plates? Because we're already managing quite a bit. And that's just for healthy children. I haven't even gotten to a place where we talk about children that have special needs, or dietary restrictions, things like that make it even more cumbersome to care for children in today's world. So a lot of information, but still being able to be on top of that as well. So I think about a lot of proactive nature in those two fields, because I don't see it decreasing at all. Like we need to continue to do better in those with our children, do better with women, and understanding health holistically for women.
Wow. There is a powerful idea in your story, and it actually touches on different levels right now. But you're helping the founders build technology that did not exist when women like you needed it most. That sentence carries both pain and possibility. What does it make you personally? And when you think about women, mothers, parents, and families, what kinds of support or technology should have existed much earlier?
On the female technology, I would love to have, there's a lot of apps out there. And I'll be personal here. There's a lot of period tracking apps out there.
Mm.
You're tracking it, but like, is it telling you more about your cycle, or just thinking when it's coming and that's it? Like, you could use a regular calendar for that.
Yeah.
You know, but what else is it telling you about your energy, your sleep, the foods that will actually nourish you at different times of the month versus not? Exercise, because they tell you should work out 4 to 5 days a week and at least 30 minutes and all of these things. But like, the exercise can look differently over the course of the month too, and actually be better in weight loss if you actually understood how your body worked across the month. So like, hitting it hard and just eating protein and weightlifting is not going to do much good when your energy is low, or it's a time of the month and you just maybe should slow down, take a walk, stretch a little bit more. So thinking about those ebbs and flows around female health as well, like, just another period tracker is not going to be it. Like, that's not it. And then I take it to the next level. How can we start to use that data that we get synced to our Apple Watch, or we sync to, these apps? How can I get that to my doctor so that my doctor can use these information or these signals to help with my overall health? How can we do that? Because, taking a blood draw at a certain point in time, that's information, that's data. But if you're in an app and you're tracking all of this information, how you feel every day, what's your energy level, like what you're eating, all of this stuff, how is that getting back to your doctor so that you have a better picture? We talk about data in silos, same thing. Your doctor sees one snapshot, you see another, and it's very hard to connect both so that you get the care that you need so that you can have the life that you want to live from a health perspective. So that's
Wow.
what I think about on that layer. Like, we've got so much of a road to go, and we're getting there. Trust me, we're getting there. But holistically, how do we now think about access to get that information, more holistically to the medical providers that are in service of us and our bodies?
Yeah. So this is interesting. I'm also learning something about, even when you think about the solution, and this makes a lot of sense when you involve, everyone in designing some of these solutions and, like addressing the real issues. So FemTech is sometimes treated as a niche. And when you look at it deeply, at scale, women's health, family systems, caregiving, parenting, framing, feels far too small, right? From your perspective, why do many operators, investors, and business leaders still underestimate FemTech and parenting tech? Do they misunderstand the market size? Do they misunderstand the seriousness of the problems? Or do they just lack the commercial imagination to see what these categories can become? Because even from your definition of like what just a period tracker could add value more into a day-to-day life, it starts now to make sense. Like, why do I need it? It's just not just to tell me my time of the month and stuff like that. For a lady, there is more. What is that most these stakeholders miss?
Yeah, all of the above, MK. All of the above. So from a market standpoint, from a global perspective, female technology is charting toward $1 trillion industry. So lots of investment coming, but the understanding around women's bodies, if we think about the population, about half of the population is women, half are male. That's what we see. And so when we think about it, like, well, half the population doesn't even, experience this. So why should it matter? And it's like, it's half the population. It should matter, or, it doesn't directly impact me in a way that I can understand, and therefore take it to a place where I can, monetize this or make money off of this. The gaps are still there. And so I think it's a lot of missed opportunity. It's misunderstanding, that it's coming along. But again, we've got to make up for a lot of, like, and I think about, I'm in the US, our administration that is kind of pulling back on some of the investment and importance around women's health and things like that. So it's like, not only do we now have to make back what we're losing, now we're also trying to bring it forward at the same time. That's a lot of work in such a short amount of time. And just really having the research to understand women's bodies, from some of my research, the way women's bodies are looked at is that like we're just a mini man or mini male, if you will, but our hormonal, genetic makeup, everything is very different. And until we have an acute awareness and knowledge around like how women's bodies work, how hormones are triggered, and understanding that holistically, we're always going to be at a disadvantage. There was a doctor, she focuses on menopause and perimenopause, and she said that in her over 30 years as a doctor, OBGYN, she's never given the same treatment plan for menopause ever, because there's over 100 different ways menopause can show up for women, like in terms of things that are challenges for us once you go through that phase in life. So 100 different symptoms, a combination, not that you're going to go through all of them, but there's a combination of a number of them, and they look differently across all women. And she's never been able to give the same treatment plan to say, here's how you'll be able to live your life a lot better, a little bit more comfortably, because there's 100 plus symptoms that we would be dealing with. So she's given derivative plans, but never the same treatment plan once. So it takes that level of like relentlessness and attitude to say, I really am here to serve this woman and how she is not living her best life right now because of X, Y, and Z, and how things are mismanaged, undiagnosed, diagnosed improperly. Like there's a lot that goes into it. But again, as we research more, as we spend the time to invest into understanding women's bodies, we can make those, try to deduce from those. And I'm not going to speak for all medical professionals, but we can try to deduce more into what can we see as patterns, and then go from there to help women in their bodies.
Wow. That's mind-boggling. So let's change gears a bit and see how you help many of these mission-driven founders. So many of these mission-driven or impact founders worry that too much structure will make the company feel less human, right? But I wonder if the opposite can be true. Can strong commercial infrastructure actually protect the mission? Can discipline become a form of care? How do you help founders build systems without losing the emotional truth that made them start in the first place?
Yeah, it's really understanding those goals. So when I say the listening tour, that's what I'm holding us accountable to. I don't want to lose that level of energy and passion and drive. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to dilute that. I don't want it to be mistaken or misplaced into other areas of the business. We're keeping that. But that's what I know. Like if this is something that is very powerful and strong and rings true to you, that's what we're going to continue to have in our conversations as we think about the commercial approach to your business, as we think about the ways we can go into new markets or, uncover processes. Hey, this is still I call it our guiding light or northern light, if you will, that we're sticking to. How do we then continue to do everything in support or in service of that? It's not one or the other. It's how do we amplify that message or that mission and the way that the founder sees it through everything that we do. And so it's a much different conversation than I had with, than being on the B2B SaaS side. We don't focus that hardcore on it, but this is how it's fundamentally different with working with these types of founders. Because this is, and honestly, as a consultant, this is the type of stuff like I would gladly spend a little bit more time on this, because if we can figure this out and move the needle, and I can use my RevOps superpower or go-to-market superpower to help this founder figure their business out in a way that not only gets them to a place where they can make more money, but they can support so many more women and how they experience life on a day-to-day basis. Absolutely, I'll spend that time. Absolutely, I'll invest. Absolutely, we'll take a little bit of time to think through our approach to make sure that it matches the mission.
Wonderful. So I want to connect this to African founders and other founders building in emerging markets. In many of these contexts, founders are not only building a product, they may also be building trust. They may be educating the market. And better still, they may be navigating infrastructure gaps, policies, government, democracy. They may be creating distribution. They may be proving that a category deserves a capital. From your perspective, what commercial challenges do African and emerging market founders need to think about earlier? And which lesson from B2B SaaS travel travel well across geographies without forcing founders to copy playbooks that do not fit their reality?
Yeah, so I think about, so you're talking more about the global perspective. And when I think about that, it's not like, can we just replicate or copy and move it into the new market? Really understanding the market that you're in and leveraging these playbooks. So when I say I've created the infrastructure, again, these are years of playbooks that I've seen going very right and very wrong. And so you're leveraging that to integrate into your market or who you're planning to serve. It's not just a direct replica. It can't be, because it's the things that we experience in the US, I'm sure is very different than all over the world. But that doesn't mean that you can't impart your knowledge and your strokes of genius in your area, in your field, in your industry to enhance the things that are already built. I'm not saying you have to go out and like build it from scratch every single time. That is not the case, but making sure that you are listening and you're learning from the pitfalls and the successes to build something that works for your market and where you are today. So when I think about, like, there's founders like wearables. In the US, we like to wear a lot of rings and things like that, or your watch and things like that. There was a founder that I found actually wants to have waist beads that tell the same information around women's health. That's something that's not really in the US market. People don't wear waist beads here. I do. I have. But like that was something that was very intriguing, and that was something that was very, very integral for the market in Africa. So like that is something that I think about, like, how do you then leverage the ring type, something that's very natural for US, but in a way that makes it understandable and easy to adopt in your market. So that's something that I think about.
Yeah, waist beads. And they don't require charging and stuff. So maybe someone should come with an idea on how to charge it, to put some health data there and stuff. So this actually bring us to the current situation that we're in, which is, of course, localize the solution, make sure that the context is right, make sure you're solving for the immediate market before you scale. And even when you scale, you don't just scale blindly, but you scale with the intention of ensuring that it fits the purpose. So we're living in the age of AI. And, as you mentioned earlier, there's a convoluted decision making. You're also having this convention in the age of AI, and AI can help founders move faster. It can help them analyze more. It can help them automate more. But if the underlying decision system is weak, speed can also amplify confusion. If a founder already has unclear priorities, AI may help them move faster in the wrong direction. If the founder has clarity, AI can amplify execution. How should founders think about decision quality in the age of AI? Does AI make decision infrastructure more important, not less? Do people need to do more or less thought leadership first and then feed that into the AI when they have clear focus and way? What does that journey look like in this age of AI?
Yeah, so that's a good question. AI can be leveraged in different ways in different parts of your business. So you could use it for like brainstorming, and you could use it for data. You can use it for understanding like patterns or micro patterns, things like that. But you want to give it enough context. I think the underlying theme is giving it enough context so that it understands you, your business, your brand, where you're trying to go, having that documented in a place that makes sense. Because like you said, it will lead to confusion if you just trust it. It'll be like having my 3-year-old come in and give you business advice. It just doesn't really, it doesn't work. You know, he knows nothing about you, your business. He can't give you any, like, so think about it at that level. Like, have I given AI enough information to mature it to a place where it can give me micro patterns and data insights or helping with brainstorming? Or am I literally just using it to like data mine information and just kind of spit out an answer? Like, that's it? Like, you know, so you really have to think about that before you leverage AI, especially if you're thinking about how to either improve your decision making when it comes to your instincts, or you know, redirect you or your energy into a different place. So really understanding what those outcomes should be before you just set to it to AI. And then again, go back to yourself. You are human. You're, you know, make sure you have the context, make sure that you understand what this outcome is does it make sense? You know, there's times where I've used AI and I'm like, oh, it's clearly hallucinating right now. And if I didn't deduce that, you know, to say like, I can't trust this answer, like, okay, I've got to start over. Or what did I ask that was too convoluted to make it start hallucinating in the first place? And now I've got to kind of backtrack a little bit. So coming up with a process on how you want to use AI, the information that it needs to give you the right information based on where you are in your business, and not relying on it for every single thing. I talk a lot with my founders around fallback plans. What is the manual fallback plan when this ups and goes kaput or the system goes down? We see this a lot on the B2B SaaS side. Like, what happens when there's no connection, you know, or the connection breaks? The person that is in charge of, you know, this integration of some sort is out of town. Oh no, like, you know, what happens? Does the business just stall until that person comes back? Do you call that person on vacation, say, hey, business is down, sorry about your vacation, but hop online? Like, like that, like what's the fallback plan? And trust me, I've been the one that they've called on vacation when things have broken. So not fun, but thinking about what does that look like for your business, especially if you're
Yeah.
going to leverage AI in multiple areas of your business.
Yeah. So AI should not in its entirety be thought about replacing humans, because as you're stating out, there are some things that definitely you need human intervention. And I think earlier on, I mentioned that even interacting with the AI, given in tech, there's some scenarios where you feel like this needs to be more human. Can I talk to a person, you know, and try to explain, or they try to explain what is happening? So that's the reality. So I want to delve more about you and what you do and what it's like to work with Arriel. So I want listeners to understand what it feels like to work with you.
Yeah.
A founder may come to you with urgency. They may say, revenue feels inconsistent. The team is working hard, but no alignment. The pipeline is unclear. The market is promising, but hard to read. I want to be $1 billion business in the next year. The founder is still carrying out too many decisions alone. When the founders work with you, what actually changes? What do you help them see, decide, build, or stop rating?
So when they come to me, again, the messaging that I've already put out in terms of like connecting with people, understanding like where their business are, they're very proactive. So I'm not the firefighter consultant that's going to come in when everything's already drowning and people are leaving left and right because they're unhappy. That's not the work that I do. So we come in, we are very, like I use the word proactive quite a bit, but they're thinking or anticipating, where do I need to have this business grow? And so they are looking for a thought partner. They're looking from someone that has been there before, that's going to give them, you know, trusted advice, and like be a, not just be a fly on the wall, someone that's just going to be the yes person. And yeah, that's great. That's great. AI will do that for you all day. But I'm here to support you as a founder and your journey as you grow. So early stage mission driven founders. So that said, that could look, the scope of our engagement could look differently. Sometimes it includes a little bit more of your product testing and looking at it from a user standpoint. Sometimes it is more strategic. Sometimes I have to get hands-on and say, let me get in there a little bit with you, because you know the team size is still nimble. There is still an element of respect. I'm not coming in here to say, hey, my way or the highway. Like that's not it at all. It's really to come in, understand, hear your voice, be able to see the patterns, being able to come to you with structured communication. We also have our revenue clarity briefs at the end of each month that we're saying, these are the things that we worked on. These are the things that we improved. This is where we're still making progress. This is something that you can tell your board. Okay, your board is trying to understand this investment and working with someone like me to help move the needle with the business. That's where we're coming. It's something to, like, you don't hand it to them, but you're able to have a better conversation because you have the insights and the clarity that you didn't have before working with me. And so that's part of it. So like I said, listening towards is part of it. We have the AI component of how we'll work together as well. So if we can embed that into your systems or processes, if that's what's applicable for your business at that time. Otherwise, we're working with your team. We're working with you as a founder to help with some of those information gaps. We're giving your documentation as well to make sure that you and your team know where to go further. And if that means I have to get hands-on, in some cases, definitely hands-on. I'm, like I said, still an operator at heart. Love tinkering with things and figuring out how to not to tinker with products to just poke holes. I tinker with it to figure out how to make it better. So that's another thing to understand. Like, I'm using the lens of an operator, so your team that will use it, you as a founder, what would I want if I was in your shoes? And then thinking about the customer, that's always central to that conversation. Is this what the customer needs right now? And what are the signals that is coming from the customer that you should be listening to?
Wonderful. So what kind of founder is most ready for your work? Is it the founder approaching Series A, the founder whose team is growing faster than the systems, the founder who has traction but not yet repeatability, the credit card, disconnection, the kind of scenario, the founder who feels the business becoming heavier than the original vision? How should someone self-diagnose and say, this is the moment I need decision infrastructure, trademarked solution, and area to be on this table to move forward?
Yeah. So I work with seed to Series A founders, specifically in female technology, ParentingTech. It's still B2B SaaS. I love that too. But really focusing on the FemTech and ParentingTech side of the house. You are a founder that is seeing that things are not working. You're trying to uncover where those things are. You may be very busy and don't have the time. And that's the kind of clarity that you need at a very granular level to look at your sales through your post-sales processes to uncover why revenue is leaking and how we can plug that leak and get that revenue back in your pocket.
Wonderful. So let us do a practical diagnostic for founders listening, right? Are you ready?
Yes,
So this is a patient doctor kind of expert engagement, right? So I'll name a few symptoms and I'll have your perspective on what they might reveal. Just be short and precise, but also, again, clear to the point. One, if a founder is still involved in nearly every major sales, partnership, or customer decision, what does that usually reveal?
That reveals that they're still heavily involved in founder-led sales, which means the founder has had relationships with these companies and built relationships over time and hasn't really let go of the sales process because either they haven't figured out how to operationalize what they do and make it special so that somebody can replicate or mimic that, or they don't understand what sales process that can be leveraged by other folks on the team for them to operate at the level that the founder expects.
Wonderful. If the team has data, but everyone interprets the numbers differently, what does that usually reveal?
I would say that is a combination of language, because with data, you have to understand, like, what are you actually picking up on in terms of the data. So it could be a language issue. And usually data issues very rarely come up as just data. It could also mean a process issue, like how you're gathering that information or data, or what you're not gathering. So combination of data quality as well as communication.
Wonderful. If revenue is growing but forecasting still feel emotional, what does that usually reveal?
That there is no process. I laugh because when I've seen it a lot of times where we're like, yeah, we're going to close X amount of, ARR, and there's nothing to really substantiate that number or to support that number. It is very much a gut feel. It's just a guess at that point. You might as well say unicorns will drive down the highway tomorrow and it'll come true. So that's yeah, we want to remove that process of just kind of guessing.
Great. If customers like the product, but conversion is slow or inconsistent, what does that usually reveal?
If customers like the product but conversion is slow, understanding, so they don't really feel or trust that your product or service can fill their gaps in terms of their pain point and what they're feeling. That's what usually is the underlier there.
All right. If the founder is working harder but feeling less clear, what does that usually reveal?
Prioritization challenges. Don't know what to prioritize, so you do it all.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's sometimes it's called like quick fire kind of questions. So let's shift to inner leadership. There's also an inner leadership shift here. Okay. All right. And I found us to move from being the person with all the answers to becoming the person who builds a company capable of making better decisions. That requires trust. It requires humility. It requires discipline. And sometimes it requires letting go. What inner shift does a founder need to make when the company can no longer depend on their instincts alone and ensure that it just have its life of its own?
So I always default to people and process. That's the first. I'm very human-centered, AI supported. So when I think of those challenges where the founder just can't let go, you also have to enable your teams to be able to operate at that level. There was a study that was done a long time ago, like the rat and the cheese. You ring the door, the bell, the rat goes gets the cheese. So if that is the behavior that you are perpetuating, that they're going to like ring the bell, hey, I have a problem, and they come to you and you give them the cheese, you give them the answer, they're not going to think for themselves. But as you start to think about how can I change the behavior so that I can have a process that supports them in getting them to a place where they can make the right size decisions, or hey, bring these types of challenges to me as a founder. Give me the hard stuff. You mentioned Barack Obama. He said, during his administration, he never got the easy questions. He always got the hard stuff. He had to trust that his team can handle the right size decisions and when it was appropriate to bring the right things to him. And so that's the same model that we need to kind of think about. Like, can you give them a structure that says, hey, I trust you to make these kinds of decisions around these topics. These are yours, and I trust you. Whether we get it right or get it wrong, that's where we learn. Okay? If we get it right, we continue to grow. We get it wrong, we learn from it, and we enhance it for next time. But that there also has to be a cultural element, like a company cultural element to support that too. So when people fail, it's not just a blame game, and then like people feel at risk, of losing their job or, too many failures. Again, you have to understand that and mitigate that risk. But did you also enable them and train them? Did you give them a process to follow? Are you holding them accountable to what you said as a process? And are you modeling that same behavior as a founder?
Yeah, wonderful. So I love the idea the structure can be a form of care for the team, care for the customer, care for the founder, care for the mission. Do you see decision infrastructure that way? Can better systems help people breathe, focus, and do better work? And in my line of work, actually, we appreciate what we call framework, because framework gives that structure that can actually scale anything that you want to do. But in this case, structure actually cuts across different way of working, way of scaling. And I feel like it's the science behind the success of most of these teams. But in a nutshell, do you see decision infrastructure that way?
Yeah, it is care for the team. So I didn't realize when I was like in my corporate career before I started with consulting that I was actually building my own operating system. I was building the structure that I wanted because I didn't have it. And so when I got to a place to say, this is how I do things, or this is how this flows, or this is my process, I'm happy to take feedback and hear from you if that's working for you or not. But I have a process and I hold myself to this standard for a reason. That then lended itself to be able for people to say, you know what, working with her was a breeze. I actually like she is making things better. Oh, I finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so that is the same type of thing that I want more mission driven founders to experience very early on. It took a while to get there. Again, you talk about like building trust. That's part of building trust because I have the same process. Like I'm not going to play favorites just because, you are a high performer or I really love working with you. Like it's more about do I stick to the process? And yes, if I need to make some amendments, yes, I'm fine to make that, but I have to have justification in doing so. And so then having those boundaries, setting those expectations, communicating what my process is, people start to trust that. And then they start to expect that. And then they want to excel at it because, working with me is a breeze, or now things are more clear. And they have the clarity that they didn't have before. But it takes that curiosity, investment of your time to be able to get there.
Wonderful. So what would be, what would you say to experienced operators who have built commercial systems in mature industries, but are not yet considered bringing the expertise into women's health, parenting technology, or underserved markets? What should they pay attention to?
The folks that are truly underserved. So think of, in ParentingTech, think of the folks that very low access to technology or understanding of how would you step them through the process of leveraging your technology so that they have access to it? Have you actually tested those folks? I think, and same goes for female technology as well. So are you actually speaking to women that are truly underserved, and how so? And how does this now serve them? By having this available to them or having the access to them. So thinking about both of those conversations from a parenting perspective as well as a female perspective, have you actually touched more people than you think? With technology, I think it comes, you have to think about it in a way that's like, if I have a product that's only available on iPhone, does everybody have an iPhone? How can someone get access to this if they have an Android? Do you have a mobile? And if you like a different mobile structure, or if you have a web version, now you're saying, does this person have a desktop or a laptop? How else can they access this, on a regular way if internet is unstable or they'll have access to regular Wi-Fi, things like that. Like, is there a way that we can think about technology in a way that is suboptimal is the best way I would say it. How can I still use this if everything kind of breaks down around me? And as a woman and thinking about my body and my health doesn't just shut down because the internet goes out. I still need access to do the things that I need to do to have information. So what could it look like to have a world where we think about our tools and technology at services of ourselves for the people that are optimal, have regular, internet access to power, knowledge and, language, all of those things, but also for those that don't. What does that look like? And then I start thinking about people that are maybe visually impaired, hearing impaired. Does your product still fit the bill for those folks? Thinking about it from that way, like you really have to think a lot harder and deeper about how it serves that's how your product starts to become sticky. If this is the only technology out there that is accessible to hearing impaired or visually impaired, and they can still operate on your platform without any hiccups or gaps in service, think about it from that standpoint. That's what really helps. Yeah.
Wonderful. So what should investors, policymakers, accelerators, and ecosystem builders understand about the founders working in these categories? And what kind of support actually helps? And what kind of support sounds useful but does not move the company forward?
I think traditional thinking. I mean, we want to put everyone in a bucket. We want to standardize as much as possible. We want to think about business in that way, but it's really unfair to kind of think of it in a silo or think of it in a way that is very short-sighted. Like, oh, how can I make money on this tomorrow? Like that's not how we need to think about things. Like, are we actually in service of the right people at the right? That's what I'm thinking about. So, when I think of policymakers as well, there is a component of like serving the administration that is currently in office, and it gets uncomfortable. So having those uncomfortable conversations to stand up for what's right, that's what matters. And just because you may not be your lived experience, or it may not be your lifestyle, or you don't fully understand it completely, that's where you start to state, how can I just advocate for something? Even if I don't understand it 100% of the way, can I still advocate for this to bring it forward rather than backward?
Absolutely. And I've ever seen someone or companies donate computers. In fact, this year, actually, a friend of mine works in tech, and they wanted to come back home. And they got these computers they wanted to bring back for accessibility and just to give people an opportunity. And the biggest challenge they told me they're dealing with is the taxation that comes with this donation is way over a brand new machine of the same kind. So they were trying to get exemptions, from the donors, the country of donation, and another exemption from the ministry that is in charge of, the same. And it was a headache, getting that. So sometimes some of these policies, they mean good when they're set out, but there are some exceptions that should be considered accordingly when it comes to, ensuring that the implementation doesn't prohibit or doesn't punish the well intention of different innovators. But even what you shared actually is something that actually delves into that in a high level. So I want to come back to Infinitely Elevated. The name itself suggests growth, but not just growth for its own sake. It suggests elevation with intention. Through Infinitely Elevated, what are you ultimately building? Beyond consulting, beyond coaching, beyond frameworks, what kind of founder, company, or market future are you trying to help create?
Yeah, so I was very intentional about coming up with the name of the business that supported not only the consulting side of it, but also the career coaching aspect of it as well. And so I wanted it to be an open door policy. I wanted it to be a place where folks can come back. So I think about career coaching. We may work together for a promotion, but now when you get that promotion, things aren't maybe working out anymore. Come back. I still understand your story. You don't have to start over with a new coach, just because you want to get to a new level in your career. And then I think about that as the consulting side as well. So being in tech, have colleagues that are also consultants as well. It felt like everyone's like a one and done game. Like I get in, help the company with this one thing, and then it's done. And then there's no path to come back as the company grows, or there's no path for folks on your team to come back and say, hey, I still have questions and this is important to me, or what did you mean by this? So that we can take it to the next level, or we're at the next level. Yay, what do we do now? So that was the premise behind the business name. having that open door policy, being able to come back, being able to have the impact that we want to see again and again and again. And just again, if I've vetted you as a prospective client on the coaching side or as a consulting side, that means I really want to work with you. If I've spent the time to get to know you and your life and your goals as, an individual, I want to keep working with you because I am constantly rooting for your success. I recall conversations from years ago because I'm like, oh, I'm still thinking about you, or how's that? Or they come back and they're like, I did the thing, we talked about it and I got it, yay. And I'm like, well, how's it going? Have you talked to your boss? Is that boss still there? Like, I can pick up on those conversations with the same level of context and enthusiasm, just as we were working together. That's the whole premise. Same side for the consulting. So I want to hear you say as a founder, I've achieved the goals, I'm on to the next thing. Can we work together again? Or this is how I want to up level, and really continuing that really proactive approach to how they're building their business.
Wonderful. That's so great. And when people leave this conversation, I remember Arriel Balogun or Mrs. Arriel Balogun. What do you hope they remember? The operator, the strategist, the coach, the builder, or something deeper?
Honestly, all of the above. All of the above and some, because I think I'm moving into a new way of work, like uncovering new ways of coaching that resonate. So that's even different from like how I coach my clients, because it's human first. I think about storytelling with some of my coaching. I think about how to make you feel that you're heard, hear you, and then now that I hear you, what's next? How do we chart that together? Pushing you comfortably, pushing you into a way of figuring out and determining how you can think bigger and bolder for yourself. Same with consulting. How can you think bigger, bolder, a little differently for your business, for the people that are relying on you to put food on the table? How can we think about your success in terms of our success, and collectively success for many women or many parents that are coming behind us?
Wonderful. And finally, what is one decision every founder listening should make more consciously after this conversation?
There's two parts. So
Okay.
one, enabling your team. So if you have a team, how do you enable them better? Stop with the assumptions, stop with we should be, we could be, and actually figuring out ways to truly support them as your team. Again, human centered, human focused. Then thinking about, in the ways that you have exhausted ways to train and enable your team, how can you then use technology to support the gaps, not the other way around?
So before we close, where should people go to learn more about your work, connect with you, or explore Infinitely Elevated? But on the same breath, I normally make it a culture to ask my guests, how are you building body, mind, and spirit?
Good question. So if someone wants to learn about what I do, you can go to my website, infinitelyelevated.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Arriel. And to connect mind, body, and spirit, I think definitely taking a break. We move so fast. My thing to connect mind, body, and spirit, I either do hiking or trail running, to really get back to myself, get into nature, but get back to myself and listen, hear my own thoughts rather than allowing AI or news or hype get in my head, to really get back to my instincts and what's working and what's not. And I do have a lot of aha moments on the trail. So find your thing, what works with you to connect your mind, body, and spirit, and keep doing that thing. Don't disregard it just because it's busy and things are very, we're pressed for time, I feel, in a lot of ways. So get back to whatever centers you holistically.
Wonderful. Arriel, thank you so much. What I'm taking from this conversation is that companies building for overlooked human needs cannot scale on urgency alone. But it is disciplined decisions, clear infrastructure, honest market understanding, and deep respect for mission that allow the work to endure. You have helped us see that many founders are not failing because they lack passion or skill. They're not failing because the problem is not real. They may be struggling because the company has outgrown the decision system that got it started. And in markets like FemTech, ParentingTech, and underserved technology, categories that clarity is not optional. It is part of the work. It is part of the responsibility. It is part of building technology with dignity. Thank you for joining us on Impact Masters podcasts. And thank you for listening. For everyone who has been joining us throughout the 2 hours straight talk that looked like 30 minutes. And if this conversation gave you clarity, challenged your thinking, or helped you see your work differently, share it with a founder, operator, investor, or a leader who is building something that matters. The future will not be shaped by technology alone. It will be shaped by the quality of our decisions, the courage of our builders, the discipline of our system, and the humanity we refuse to lose as we scale. I am Michael Kimathi. You can find me on LinkedIn on the same name. And my guest has been Arriel Balogun, going by the same name on LinkedIn, but with a couple of titles after that name, MBA, name it, 15 years of experience, very smart, intelligent lady. I recommend you to like connect with her and, ask questions, even post this, listening. Until next time, keep building with clarity, with courage, and with impact. And remember to take care of your body, mind, and spirit. Until next time, my name is Michael Kimathi. Thank you.
Thank you.
And within Africa, what I see personally is a collaborative space where we can create value across multiple different sectors and across multiple different countries. And what does that require? It requires each individual to play their part. And more so than that is also for us to be able to collaborate to make sure that we are maximizing the value that exists amongst us.
A lot of people founders here and a lot of developers here can attest that sometimes we build MVPs for even 4 months and 6 months, only to put it in the market and realize it's not going to work. People don't like it, it can't do anything. And then you have to build again for 6 months. Before you know it, that's 1 year.
The best gift you can give to a human being is a chance.
Exactly. A child that does not cry will die in the career.
There are too many problems in the world for us not to be the solutions to them. There are too many of us pointing fingers, looking for other people to solve for things that we know innately we have a piece of the puzzle for.
Think about the failures you've had in your life. Don't you learn more from failure than you do from success? I have.
Absolutely, that's where the biggest lessons are.
Yeah.
That was a great conversation. Thank you so much. It was really super. And your microphone is good. So yeah, I hope. So the next step is that we'll release this, not immediately, of course, but the live is still there. So what I'm planning to do this year, I think if you follow us, you have seen that, is just break it into shorts, like sound bites. And that's why actually it took a lot of time to like send you everything. So there are a couple of things that I'm improving from the previous engagement, because for different media, they have changed the algorithm. So I have to keep up with them. But definitely feel free to share the live one. It's on our Impact Masters page. It's going to be there. But of course, the way people work, like no one watches that something that is not live. But if we share and even be creative around it, well and good. Just feel free to tag us. We'll reshare and all that. But once it's I'll look at it. Even it's re-editing, well and good, because I partner with Africa Stocking. Then we'll break it down, then start sharing shots as we share the the main episode. But that was a great conversation, Arriel. Thank you once again. I've learned a lot myself. Yeah, I don't know. So welcome once again. If you